How do you select the best people to connect with? Because I mean, there's billions of people on the planet. Let's say millions and millions, hundreds of millions in North America. Let's say you want to connect with entrepreneurs. There's hundreds of thousands of them. How do you select? What kind of criteria do you look at to decide who you want to connect with?
So I would say there are a few. It always depends on what you want to achieve with that outreach. Do you want to promote a blog post? Do you want to ask for a link for SEO? Do you want to interview someone, etc.? So the approach is always a bit different, and the call to action will be different as well. So make sure you have a clear idea of why you're reaching out before you do your research, because it could also mean that you do your research on via specific filters on LinkedIn. If you have, let's say, a podcast and want to interview people in person in Montreal, you would look for I don't know, depending on your podcast, but for you it could be growth hackers in Montreal who have done X, Y, Z. So yeah, focus on on what you want to achieve. Then I would say also, think about if it's a just-in-time outreach or just in case. Because usually we tend to do just in case in outreach and say maybe will be useful to him or he'll be useful to us. But I think it's much more powerful to focus on the just in time outreach, so that you reach out to people with a clear call to action and some a next step basically, so that the relationship can flourish. And
can you explain a little bit more on that? What do you mean by just in time outreach?
Let's say you wanted to interview some people in another space, for instance, let's say for the example, travel hacking. I think you should start with the people who you already know from your network, you've seen online, etc., because you have a connection with them already. You know them, maybe you've seen them at events and stuff like that. And those people you already know are much easier to interview or to get something from. So you always start with the next layer of your network. And you have something in common with them, versus some people who are in your far outer network, and that you might interview, but in a few years when you've done all your contacts and the contacts of your contacts. I feel like the referral part of it is pretty important. So if you interview me, for instance, a question you should ask me is, do you know some people like you who would like to be interviewed as well? Because It makes the job easy for you, and it's always relevant people.
It does, and actually Vin Clancy was through you, if I remember correctly, right? Because I asked you who else could be interesting to interview, and you said, well, how about this guy? He's coming to my event, and you should interview him, and that's how it happened.